What's going on, Dolphins? It is your boy Dillon, and I am here to make my preview video for the Miami Dolphins versus Buffalo Bills. It is going to be in Hard Rock Stadium, so it is a home game for us. And we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'll get to that, my preview for that in a minute. Stats, league standings, analysis, and so on and so forth. But I've been really busy, this week, and I haven't been able to report on some things. There's some news today that broke, and also some other things that have been going on over the past few days that I want to touch on real quick. So I'm going to talk about that, those other things really fast. A lot of it actually happened today, but there's some other stuff that happened within the past few days that I want to touch on. First of all, today, Allen Hurns, wide receiver Allen Hurns, was given a 2-year extension worth $8 million and $3.27 million guaranteed. Also, Andrew Donnell, tackle Andrew Donnell, was waived, or he was cut, whatever, one of those designations, whatever. He's been released. He's no longer on the team, to make room for Julian Davenport, who just came off of IR. Getting into some bigger things, as you guys know, Colin Kaepernick was given like a pro day kind of workout for the NFL. But honestly, it really does, when you look at all the details, it really does look like some sham PR stunt by the NFL. But it looked like, Jay-Z had to talk them into doing it to begin with. But then even all the details, I mean, they held it on a Saturday when GMs and coaches really aren't, able to, take the time to go to it because they're, prepping for games and so on and so forth. At first, the NFL said that they were going to provide the list of teams that were going to be there to Colin Kaepernick, and then they later on changed their mind and said, no, we're not going to give him that list. Then today, when the workout happened, he had actually moved the location of the workout because the NFL would not allow the media to attend at the location that it was being held at. So he changed it so that way the media could actually attend. I mean, come on, like really, when you look at all that information, like, does anybody really believe that the NFL's really trying? No, it's just a sham, so that way they can have the appearance that they're trying to do the right thing. And so even though they were coerced into doing it to begin with, and I mean, they're not really showing that they give a shit. So there's that. Plus, Colin Kaepernick apparently, though, lit it up in his little pro day thing. Apparently only 7 teams actually were there. I didn't see the list. I haven't seen a list of the teams that were for sure had representatives, but I saw some tweets that only 7 teams did. We were supposed to be one of the teams, so we'll see on that. But Colin Kaepernick also blasted the NFL for being cowards and running from the truth and so on and so forth, which of course is the fact. And all they really give a shit about is their money at the end of the day. Also, major news today is Alabama quarterback Tua Tagovailoa got injured, and he is now out for the remainder of the season because he has a hip injury, a hip dislocation injury. And so now at this point, not only is he a smaller quarterback, just, by generalized standards, not only does he have, significant ankle injuries to both ankles, but now he has this hip injury. And so, look, again, I would never take a quarterback in rounds 1 or 2. I would take one every single year in 3 or later. So I don't agree with that, but it is highly likely that we're going to take a quarterback. Now, the generalized consensus pick is that it's Tua Tagovailoa. But and especially if the draft works out, if we win more games and so on and so forth, that we don't get the number 1 overall pick, and then if we have to trade away a bunch of our draft picks, which is possible, we don't know yet, obviously. But if we trade away, like, let's say all of our first round picks to jump up to where the Bengals are going to be picking to get a quarterback, if they then took Tua Tagovailoa after doing that, I mean, that literally couldn't be any worse. Now, again, I mean, to be fair, we have to wait and see. Maybe they like Joe Burrow or Herbert or Fromm, or I don't know, right? it's a pretty for sure thing that the Dolphins are going to take a quarterback. But we don't know who. We just don't know who Stephen Ross loves. But hear me now, quote me later. Whichever quarterback it is that, and maybe at one point he did love Tua, but now with this new injury, maybe he's like, whatever. So maybe he changes his mind, right? I still think it would be a disaster to have to trade away all that draft capital that you accumulated and have been using as part of your defense for why you decided to jettison all of your talent and so on and so forth. Not only do I think that would be a disaster regardless of who the quarterback would be at that pick, but if you then took the massively injury prone at this point, because I mean, he's got a significant list now of injuries, whereas Ryan Tannehill, to juxtapose, only has the one injury, and it was out of his control. It was just unfortunate, and he's bounced back just fine since then. Anyway, but he has a significant injury history, and he's not going to have an adequate line next year, if that's the case. So that would be the worst decision that could be made. Now, we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. Obviously, we have to wait and see how many more games, if any, do we win. See where the Steelers pick lands. See where the Texans pick lands, blah, blah, blah. See what then we end up actually doing in the draft, right? So all of that is still unknown. We have to wait and see how it goes. I don't have confidence in this regime to do it right, but you know, I can't blame them for anything in that regard yet. We have to wait and see. We have to allow the facts to come in before we can actually say for certain. Up until then, it's just perspective and speculation. But to another point, the Steelers did just lose their last game. They played on Thursday night and they lost to the Browns 21-7. And as you guys know, or probably know, there was a massive fight. The Steelers center, Mike Pouncey, is suspended for 3 games. Myles Garrett is the defensive end for the Browns, so we're not going to have to face him when we play the Browns later. Because he's suspended for the remainder of the season. There was a big scuffle. Myles Garrett pulled off Mason Rudolph's helmet and hit him in the head with it, which is totally unacceptable without question, right? But then there was a big brawl. Like, it got nasty. There's still fines going out. The teams got fined. Like, it was massive, and it went everywhere, so I'm sure everybody knows about it. But the Steelers lost, and that their pick going into that game was at 22nd. That dropped them down to 15th. Now, the defense didn't, play as well as you would have hoped, right? They kind of had a down game, but that offense is super struggling without Big Ben. Mason Rudolph is having a hard time. Not to mention they lost Juju Smith-Schuster and James Conner in that game. And it was just ugly. It was nasty. There are still definitely winnable games though for the Steelers. I mean, they play the Jets and the Bengals twice, I think, still, right? So, or at least one time, but I think they still actually have to play the Bengals twice. But, correct me if I'm wrong on that. But either way, they still do have winnable games, and they still could end. But right now it's 15th, right? Everybody was like basically saying, based off of how the year started for the Steelers, right? Everybody was saying that the Steelers pick is going to be a guaranteed top 5 or for sure a top 10. Well, it was 22nd going into this game. Now it's only back up to 15th. That's good draft positioning wise because we moved back up, but it's still only 15th and they still do have winnable games. So let's see where that ends up at the end of the year when it's a for sure thing, and then we know. But with winnable games still left on their schedule, we expect the Texans to make it to the playoffs, at least by virtue of winning their division, if nothing else. And then, it looks like, this game against the Bills could be winnable. But we play the Browns, it's a winnable game. We play the Bengals, a winnable game. We play the Jets again, winnable game, right? So there's winnable games, man. There's definitely winnable games out there. And we're at number 4 right now. So it's definitely possible that our draft positioning at the end of the year is worse than what it is now. It could be the Dolphins drop out of the top 5, maybe even the top 10, depending on how many games they do end up winning. The Steelers could end up being, a late teens, early 20s pick. And the Texans pick is pretty likely to be mid 20s, right? right now I think it's the 26th pick, and that's probably about where it's going to end up being. They should make it to the playoffs. Maybe they win in one game, but we'll see how far they can actually push into the playoffs. It's going to be it's going to be tough for them though, because there are going to be really tough teams like the Patriots and the Chiefs, right? So and it is still possible that the Steelers could squeak in, right? The Bills could end up being in as a wild card team. So right now it did get helped out, but I think a lot of people are like blowing that out of proportion. It's not like all of a sudden now it moved up back to the supposedly guaranteed top 5 pick that people were, claiming it to be. And in fact, it could end up still being, late teens or even early 20s, depending on how the rest of the season plays out. So again, with stuff like that, we need to just wait and see until, and then with, with our draft picks and our draft positioning, at the end of the year, when all the games are done, we'll know where it is, right? After the regular season, there'll be a bunch of them that are set in stone. After the first round of the playoffs and the second round of the playoffs, more get set in stone, so on and so forth. And then eventually we'll know, right? Eventually, unless the Texans or the Steelers make it to the Super Bowl, which I think is pretty unlikely for either of those teams, frankly. But unless one of them makes it to the Super Bowl, then, we'll know before the playoffs is over where all our picks are. So we'll there's not really a lot of point to belabor, that, right? Just at this point, it's every week. Okay, let's just adjust it. Where are we now? Where are the Dolphins picking? What is the Steelers' current pick? And so going into week 11 or coming, right? So the Steelers just played on Thursday. So they played in week 11, right? So now as of week 11, the Steelers have the 15th pick. Now we still need to play in week 11 against the Bills. If we lose, our draft pick will go up, right? So maybe to like 3rd. At that point, it wouldn't raise that much, I don't think. We might squeak back up to 3rd, but if we win that game, then we'll probably drop a few spots, right? More than just one spot. So I find it unlikely that we would drop only to 5th if we end up, winning and beat the Bills, drop them to 6-4 and get us to 3-7. We'll probably, we won't drop like 5 spots, but we might drop like 2 or 3 spots, somewhere in there. Anyway, so every week we'll just, adjust it and see where it is. And, I'm definitely keeping an eye on that. So, like I said, I'll let you guys know. So that's all the information that I had that's, not necessarily Dolphins related, kind of NFL related, the kind of other stuff that I wanted to throw in this video that I haven't yet been able to talk about. So let's go ahead and get to it now, the evaluation. So as I told you guys, for me at this point, all I'm really doing when it comes to the games is I'm looking at just a few core things. First and foremost, are we able to win the game, right? Again, I want wins. I don't care about where we draft. I just want to win games, and it's how you pick, not where you pick, okay? So there's that. Also, the next thing I'm looking at is not only do we win, can we win? Or even if we lose, how competitive were we, right? How competitive was this team? Because, at the end of the day, our league rankings in almost every category is still, at the very bottom of the league. And so, we're still 2-7. We're one game, we're one, if we lose one more game, then the best possible record we could have would be a flat 8-8, 500. Right? We lose 2 more games, it's a guaranteed losing season. So we're right on the cusp of that. I do think that we probably are going to be able to avoid being the worst team in history, in part because we now have 2 games won under our belt. So we're not going to go 0-16. We're not going to go 1-15, which lessens the impact. It doesn't negate fully, but it definitely lessens the impact of those stats that I mentioned about, 3.5 years on average for teams that went 1-15 or 0-16 to make it to the playoffs, and 7.5 years just to win a game. Now, who knows? There's all kinds of things that could happen, and next year we could end up going 1-15. I hope not. Hopefully they can, do the draft correctly and definitely build from some of the young guys that could be potential blocks, right? Building blocks. And hopefully we can improve and get more wins next year, whatever it is. But there is always that possibility because you just never know what's going to happen, right? Especially considering, again, I know this is not really something that almost anybody talks about, but there is a distinct possibility that depending on how the rest of the world goes, including politics, South Florida might not even exist, right? So there's that. Anyway, so the first thing, do we win the game? Whether we win, the second thing, whether we win or not, how competitive were we? The third thing, obviously, that I'm going to monitor is injuries, which obviously I'll give you the injury report in just a minute. And then finally, the fourth thing that I'm looking at for this game and the rest of the games is those young players that could potentially be building blocks. Okay, so that's it. I mean, it's that simple for me from the rest for the rest of the season. Because we don't really have at least theoretically, we don't really have the narrative of being the worst team ever. I mean, I suppose we could just, from here on out, just completely shit the bed and start losing by like 20, 30 points every game. But I find that unlikely. So I think we've avoided that. Obviously, we're not going to go 0-16 or 1-15. So we've avoided that. So really, but we also know that we're not going to the playoffs. We're not really, it's pretty unlikely that we're even going to make it to 500. Maybe we do make it. I do think that there is a little bit of a chance, a slim possibility that we even could get to 6 wins at this point based off of the games we have. But that's another thing too, is if you look at the strength of schedule this year, now going into the year, I mean, and strength of schedule, I don't really, I just look at it on a game-to-game basis, right? Like, I try not to, like, project at the beginning of the year, blah, 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 right? Like, after, like, when people were having that discussion about the first 4 games versus the second 4 games that we played and the improvements in the defense, were there improvements? Yes, absolutely, and pretty big ones, especially considering the injuries and so on and so forth. However, the quality of teams at that point were pretty clear. Right now, the Bills at this point are looking like they're actually kind of like, averaging back out. They're equalizing a bit, and that's mostly because their offense, right? Their offense is struggling quite a bit, but their defense is still pretty much third in all the major categories. So their defense is still pretty stout and doing good things. It's their offense that really needs to pick it up. And that's the same thing for the Steelers. And that's going to be their big, deciding, factor for them is their offense. But they do play some weak teams, going forward. So with that stuff, we'll see how it plays out. So let's get to these statistics. Actually, real quick, I'm sorry. Let's get to the injury report going into this game. The Dolphins very well might get 2 defensive starters back against the Buffalo Bills on Sunday, but they could be without 2 different ones. Safety Rashad Jones with a chest, which we've learned was cracked ribs or a cracked rib, and defensive end Avery Moss with an ankle, who both have missed the past 4 games, were among the 4 players the Dolphins listed as questionable on their final injury report of the week. So they could potentially return, Rashad Jones and Avery Moss. Based off of the comments by Brian Flores and so on and so forth, it looks like they are likely to come back and play. So we'll just have to wait and see until tomorrow and who the inactives are. But Jones and Moss both were full participants in practice for a second consecutive day Friday. By contrast, defensive end Taco Charlton with an elbow and linebacker Raekwon McMillan with a knee also were listed as questionable, but both players were limited in practice all week. And there is talk that those 2 guys could end up missing time, which, I mean, again, we'll just, we got to monitor, right? So we're monitoring injuries and how things go. So that's part of it, right? We'll see who ends up playing. And then, whoever does play, we'll see if they can remain healthy coming out of the game, or if their injuries flare up, or if they get re-injured, right? So that's obviously one of the key things that we're going to be paying attention to going forward. Cornerback Ken Webster, though, was ruled out and will miss a third consecutive game because of the ankle injury he sustained in the Monday night game against Pittsburgh. Buffalo had a very light injury report all week, and defensive end Jerry Hughes is the only player who even got a game status designation. Hughes, who's dealing with a groin injury, was listed as questionable. He did not practice Friday after being limited Thursday. Hughes is a big name, and that definitely impacts their defensive abilities, but if that's the extent of it, they should be able to deal with it. But that is a key piece, so that is something to look at going into this matchup. But their defense is still, they still got plenty of guys across that defense to hold up, their end of the bargain, and they've been doing it all season to this point. Tight end Dawson Knox was the only other Bills player on the injury report this week, but he didn't get a game status designation, meaning he'll be available to play. So the Bills are pretty not banged up. And obviously we are massively banged up. We had, I believe the Dolphins had I want to say 16 people on the injury report. Most of them don't even have injury or game designations. But let me real quick just give you the list of players that we have on the injury report and what their injuries are. Kalen Ballage with a neck injury and an illness. Taco Charlton, defensive end, with an elbow. Jesse Davis, guard tackle, with an elbow. Ryan Fitzpatrick, quarterback, with a right shoulder injury, his throwing shoulder. Devon Godshaw, defensive tackle, with a shoulder. Wide receiver Jakeem Grant with a toe and an Achilles injury. Linebacker Trent Harris with a foot. Safety Rashad Jones with a chest, which we know is a cracked rib. Center Daniel Kilgore with a knee. Cornerback Chris Lamons with an ankle toe. Safety Bobby McCain with a shoulder. Linebacker Raekwon McMillan with a knee. Defensive end Avery Moss with an ankle. Wide receiver Devontae Parker with a calf. Tight end Durham Smythe with a knee elbow. Cornerback Ken Webster with an ankle. Defensive tackle Christian Wilkins with a toe. And wide receiver Albert Wilson with a hip ankle. So Jesus Christ, right? And that doesn't even, count for the players that we have on injured reserve right now. Also, I'd like to note that Bobby McCain, the reports for his shoulder injury are that it's a separated shoulder. Those are the reports that I've seen. I don't know the actual validity of that. I'm not a doctor and I'm not there personally, so I'm not 100%, but those are the reports that I've seen. So if they're accurate, that is, really concerning. And so, my concern is that he could end up, injuring it further and having to end up having surgery this season. Or, if they kept him out there and he manages to, skate by throughout the season without having to go on, injured reserve and undergo surgery. It's possible they could do it in the off season and he misses significant time next year. So, we'll see. We'll definitely have to keep an eye on that injury, Bobby McCain's injury. That's a pretty big one going forward too. So anyway, that's the injury situation. Now let's go ahead and get to the stats and so on and so forth for this game. As I mentioned, the four things I'm really looking for are just, can we win? How competitive are we regardless of win or loss? Keep an eye on the injury situation and what players stick out as, what players flash, show potential, and, could possibly be, building blocks for the future. So, the Dolphins are currently 2-7. The Bills are currently 6-3. League standings, the Dolphins offensively are scoring 13.2 points per game. That was a slight uptick by 0.3 from where it was the previous week, but we then dropped from 30th to 31st. So we did have a slight uptick, but it did drop us into 31st overall. And we've only scored 119 points on the season, which is still not very good. I think we are going to be able to avoid a worst designation in that regard unless we like just stop scoring points altogether. But it's still not good. By comparison, the Bills are scoring 19.3 points per game, which is 25th. Yards per game, we have 258.6, which is 31st. They have 336.9, which is 23rd. Passing yards per game, we have 194.1, which is 29th. They have 212.6, which is 24th. Rush yards per game, we're only at 64.4, which is 32nd. And they are at 124.3, which is 12th. So again, if you look at offenses, I mean, our offense is 31st in points per game and yards per game, 32nd in rush yards per game, and 29th in pass yards. The Bills are 25th in points per game, 23rd in yards per game, 24th in pass yards, and 12th in rush yards. So, you know, they're middle to back end of the pack in most of those categories, but 12th in rush yards, so they are doing good things there. Whereas defensively, we are 31st in the league with points allowed at 29.8, and we've given up 278 on the season. The Bills are giving up 16.7 per game, which is third. Yards allowed, we're giving up 391, which is 29th. They're giving up 304.2, which is third. Pass yards allowed, we're giving up 244.9, which is 19th. So that's, and we did improve slightly from 20th, from last week. So that is the one category where we really have been legitimately improving each week, or improving overall at the very least on defense. The rest of them we've either stayed the same or I mean, we've pretty much just fluctuated between like 29th and 32nd in those other categories. That's the one category where we have definitely seen some decent improvement. Although it is also possible that we see that take a hit. I mean, against the Patriots, we'll see that stat take a hit. Maybe against the Bills, I don't know. There's maybe against the Eagles. Yeah, maybe against the Giants and Daniel Jones. We'll see. But credit though, we are 19th overall. But they are allowing 188.7, which is third. Rush yards allowed, we're giving up 146.1, which is 30th. They're giving up 115.6, which is 21st. Now, real quick, if you look at that, defensively, their weakness is the run game. But offensively, that's our biggest weakness, and we suck at it. Offensively, we're 32nd in the league with only 64.4 yards per game. They've given up 115.6, which is 21st in the league defensively. So that'll be one of the areas to look at, see who ends up winning that battle. Based off of the previous game, I'm going to guess that they win that battle, but we'll see. And yeah, I mean, basically though, I mean, as you can see head to head, I mean, they beat us in every category. So there is that. So they do win in that way. They win based off of, they have the advantage based off of record, but it is a home game for us. So we have that advantage. Looking at the statistics from each of our previous games, we won, they lost. So there's that. So we have the advantage in momentum in that way from previous game. But if you look at the statistics, they outdid us almost across the board. We won, but we only had 229 total yards. They lost, but had 344, right? And frankly, they should have won that game, could have won that game, but Baker Mayfield did string together a brilliant last drive to give them a go-ahead score, and squeaked out a last-minute win. So good on them. And hey, look, the Browns have won a couple games in a row, so good for them. Whatever, they're still way far and years away from being able to prove that they can not only achieve success but maintain success. So their tank story is still years away from being fully written. But yeah, so the Bills had 344 total yards still. In the passing game, we had 159, they had 260. Rush yards, we had 70, but also keep in mind 23 of those came from Ryan Fitzpatrick running for his life. So 47 yards only came from running backs. They had 84 rush yards, but to be fair, some of that did come from Josh Allen as well, in part because he was running for his life. So to be fair there. Yards per play, we had 3.7, but they had 5.5. We lost a fumble and threw an interception. They didn't lose one. They didn't have any turnovers. We were 37% on third down. They were 38, so they barely beat us there. We had the ball for 31 minutes and 28 seconds. They had it for 28-14, so we have the edge in that way, time of possession-wise. We had 4 penalties. They had 7, so we have the edge there. And to be fair, we are, I think, the least penalized team in the league. So that is one definite bright spot, and that is credit to the coaching staff. Well, I mean, it's also credit to the players, of course, for staying disciplined. But that's also, you know, part of the reason why they have had some success. And part of the reason why they have gotten a couple wins, right, at this point, is you know, the discipline and not committing penalties. But again, that does give, you know, that's one of the, like, few areas where, you know, at this point, I'm willing to concede, like, legitimate credit and a lot of credit to the coaching staff. That is definitely on them. Again, they do get some credit, though, for the development of some of these players, like Preston Williams, for example. But they only get, like, partial credit for players like Gesicki, right? Or, you know, Devontae Parker, right? Whatever. So, because most of that, you know, some of, like, half of Gesicki's time came from Adam Gase, and he was an Adam Gase pick. And then Parker, you know, pretty much all his time came with Adam Gase. So, anyway, there's that. Real quick, so in the passing game, Ryan Fitzpatrick was 21 of 33, 63.6% completion percentage, 169 yards, no touchdowns and 1 interception with a 63.8 passer rating. On the season, he's 61.5% completion percentage with 1,364 yards, 8 touchdowns, 8 interceptions with a 77.5 passer rating. Josh Allen was 22 of 41 with a 53.7 completion percentage, 266 yards, and a 73.8 passer rating. No touchdowns, no interceptions. On the season, he's 59.9% completion percentage, so Ryan Fitzpatrick has the advantage in completion percentage, but he has 1,919 yards. So Josh Allen has more yards than Fitzpatrick. He has 10 touchdowns, so he has 2 more touchdowns than Fitzpatrick, has the advantage there, and 1 less interception with 7. But he has a 74.3 passer rating, which the advantage or the edge goes to Ryan Fitzpatrick with his 77.5. So stats are stats, facts are clear, and those are the, you know, ways in which each quarterback has the advantage over the other. Now, these are just face-to-face analysis, right? So, or on its face analysis, right? So just head-to-head matchups, you know, our quarterback versus theirs, you know, the total yards we had from last game versus theirs, blah, 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 league standings wise, so on and so forth. A lot is that, and there's obviously a lot more that goes into it. Injuries, you know, a lot of factors in each and every game, so on and so forth. So, but it's all context and it's all very important. In the rushing game, Kalen Ballage led the way for us, 20 rushes, 43 yards, and a 2.2 average. Ryan Fitzpatrick had 4 rushes, 23 yards, 1 touchdown, and a 5.8 average. Devin Singletary led the way for them, 8 rushes, 42 yards, and a 5.3 average. Josh Allen had 6 rushes, 28 yards, and 2 scores, and a 4.7 average. And Frank Gore had 5 rushes, 12 yards, and a 2.4 average. In the receiving game, Devontae Parker led the way with 5 out of 10 for 69 yards. Allen Hurns, 2 of 4 for 32 yards. Mike Gesicki, 3 of 6 for 28. Jakeem Grant, 2 of 2 for 15. Patrick Laird, 2 of 2 for 15. John Brown led the way for them, 5 out of 11 for 77 yards. Cole Beasley, 4 of 6 for 74 yards. Dawson Knox, 4 of 6 for 55. Robert Foster, 1 of 1 for 20. Isaiah McKenzie, 2 of 4 for 19. Defensively, we had pretty good, damn good stats across the board, although I do believe some of that was like one of the interceptions, you know. Anyway, I mean, look, at the end of the day, I mean, it is important to have the context of, like, you know, one of those interceptions was, you know, kind of airmail. It was just more of a mistake on the quarterback, just like the one, you know, Dak Prescott threw to Bobby McCain, or, you know, just how, like, you know, Taco Charlton, right? He had a few sacks there and like, you know, some consecutive games, but then he hasn't really done shit since then, and he's terrible at setting the edge in the run game. So, and, you know, but everybody was making a big deal out of that when it happened. But I'm like, hold on now. Full context, a couple of those sacks were just cleanup sacks. That the one on Dak Prescott should never have happened. Prescott should have thrown the ball away. It should never have been a sack. So, you know, temper it, because it's not the whole story. But we did have good statistics. We had 1 sack, 3 tackles for loss, 1 forced fumble, 3 interceptions, and 9 passes defensed, which is pretty intense. And that's awesome, but also does go to show, you know, how our secondary has done despite these injuries with, you know, especially with Xavier Howard being out. So kudos to them, and kudos to some of these young guys, and kudos to and credit to the coaching staff for recognizing guys like Nick Needham and Ken Webster, even though Ken Webster's, you know, out and hurt. And, you know, our secondary is continuing to get even more banged up, which again is going to be another major point to keep an eye on. The Bills, though, had 2 sacks, 5 tackles for loss, and 6 passes defense. So, okay, not overly spectacular. But they did well, and their defense again is ranked, you know, 3rd in most categories as it stands. So anyway, guys, that's what I got for you. Like I said, some Dolphins news, some injury news, roster moves, you know, some around the NFL stuff with Colin Kaepernick. I mean, that whole thing is a mess, and they're, you know, anyway, I mean, the NFL is just as corrupt as any other organization or any other business in this country, and they're massively part of the problem, just like, you know, ExxonMobil and the pharmaceutical industry and the NRA is with politics, right? So, blah, 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 blah. So, you know, I mean, we definitely need to fix the country, I think, if the NFL is going to get fixed too, and if we're going to clean up, you know, the NFL, if we're going to clean it up so they actually, like, care about players and legitimately care about their safety and the quality of the game, you know, we have to fix this country so that way, you know, the NFL doesn't operate like every other business in this country and only give a shit about their bottom line, their profit motive. Right? So, and that's why they will give little breadcrumbs like this sham of a workout to Colin Kaepernick. They'll give breadcrumbs to him and to, you know, the fans, hoping that they'll, you know, be satisfied and it'll quiet it down. But as we've seen, it's not going to happen. So we need to fix, you know, the country and our entire system if we're going to get the NFL fixed. So that is part of it. And, you know, I know people don't like to throw politics in, but politics affects everything. And politics and money and corporatism and greed are why the NFL is at such a low point right now, right? Just in general with the officiating and blah, 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 all these different scandals and so on and so forth, right? So anyway, that's what I got for you guys. This is my preview for the upcoming Miami Dolphins versus Buffalo Bills game tomorrow at Hard Rock Stadium. It's going to be 10 a.m. here on the West Coast, 1 p.m. out on the East. Yeah, so, you know, like I said, guys, I'm excited. It's more Dolphins football. We actually do have a couple wins. These players are playing their ass off, so I'm hoping maybe we can steal away another victory. I want wins. Don't give a shit about draft positioning at the end of the day. So I want to win. Hopefully we can get it. I do think that the Bills are going to have the edge. I do think they probably will come away with the W. But maybe, you know, I'll have a pleasant surprise. Either way, I'm looking forward to it. As you guys already know, should know, I will be doing a live stream. I can't show the game. It is illegal. And my stream will be taken down if I did. So I can't and I won't. But I do a live stream. We do have conversations, and you know, it's a reaction to the game. I do my best to give you guys play-by-play and updates on where the game is at. So definitely join me for that, and you know, we'll have a good time with it. We always do. We always have some good conversations. There are, of course, idiots that jump in there, but it is what it is. I do always think it's funny how when like fans of the other team jump into the chat and then start like talking shit to me and telling me how like the Dolphins suck, as if it's gonna hurt my feelings. It's fucking hilarious. And I really love when other people get triggered by the things that I say. It makes my day. So go ahead, for all of those people who just like absolutely attest the truths and the realities that I point out that most people don't, you know, go ahead and keep getting triggered. I love it. Anyway, that's how I'm gonna wrap it, guys. I hope you guys enjoy my videos and my perspective. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts. Leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comment section. Make sure you share my channel and videos with all your friends and family. And of course, as always, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Dillon Tartaro. And with that, I am out. I'll see y'all soon. Fins up.